Welcome everyone to Already Cancelled. I am Peter, that is Tara. We talk about TV shows here. The year is 2022. The name of the show is Babylon 5. This is season 4, episode 5. It's called The Long Night, so full spoilers for the episode, as always. And much like I'm going to be saying about probably most episodes this season, given how big and epic and how serialized everything is, it does feel like a big episode. We have the assassination attempt. Was it successful? We'll discuss that later. But we also have a lot of Shadows and Vorlon War stuff this episode that's been set up for next time, which also feels like it's accelerating at a rate quicker than I was expecting. Maybe this is down to the fact that whatever the original plan was with, like, you know, they thought they were going to have season 4 and 5 to tell the rest of this story, and then they were told probably just season 4, so then they squeezed it all into season 4. And then found out they got a season 5 anyway. So I wonder
what time they knew.
Yeah, I wonder. Yeah, well, given that they specifically, from what we understand, from what I've heard, is that, you know, they thought they weren't getting a season 5, so they wrapped up a lot of things in season 4. That would at least say to me that they knew, or had the suspicion, at least halfway through the season. If not earlier. It could be as early as the start of the season. It could be as early as that, but
so season 5 is going to be like an epilogue?
Well, I don't know for sure. I don't know what they do, but
yeah.
I'm curious to see what they do with it, but I do wonder, like, you know, is this like insane pacing that we're almost getting, and not in the sense that it's like harming the story or anything like that, just in the sense that we're hitting these big strides, like, much quicker than I would have expected before. And ultimately, I think it comes down to there's less, like, standalone, like, flavor episodes in between. Because that's what we got a lot in the first couple of seasons. There was, like, individual little character episodes to kind of, like... And arguably, we don't need it as much now because we've done all that work. We've built all the characters up, so we can kind of go through just the major plots.
Some characters could use a little some help, though.
Was there any in particular you had in mind?
I could still use some Franklin stuff because I'm kind of neutral on Franklin right now. I assume you want me to talk about Marcus Cole. You may have heard of him. He's the ranger on board.
Is that
Babylon
his
5.
first name? Wow. Okay.
He does not die in this episode.
is that like, okay, one negative point off the start? Cold in that.
They wrote in a different character who is the same role for one day.
I really think of it that way. I assume that they still want Cole to be around, but yes, Bryan Cranston out of nowhere comes in as a ranger to have a big dramatic beat. A young
Walter White.
Yeah, young Walter White. Obviously it was nice to see him. Honestly, the thing it made me think about is that there was a time in season 2 where we had like 2 or 3 guest stars every episode that was like recognizable, and we've not had one in a while. And I think it's down to the fact that we aren't doing visitors to the station like every episode like we used to, because everything's so focused on the overall story. But it also kind of makes sense that in the circumstance that there's not a lot of just casual traveling.
People traveling.
Yeah. Like,
to beat Babylon 5, which is its own thing now.
Yeah. I mean, it actually makes sense, like, narratively, why there isn't as many people coming and going. Unless they are important officials or relevant to what's happening. So, you know, it makes sense. Let's start with the assassination stuff. Let's start with Londo, Jakar, all that side of things. Mainly because the other stuff all sets up the next episode, so it's probably better to leave it on that at the end.
Sure.
I think the first thing I'll say is I will give them a little telling off, little finger. Just to the, you know... Oh, look at what they've done. They've perfectly recreated my throne room from Centauri Prime. Oh. And all I could think is, yeah, it's convenient.
Nice try.
It's convenient that you don't have to, you know, completely have a different set. I mean, I'm sure you've adjusted it a bit to make it slightly different, but... and it's not the only show that's guilty of this. I've seen this done in other shows. There's a big joke in the final season of Angel where they go to, like, the Wolfman Heart headquarters in a different country, and I guess it's like Paris, which is not country, obviously, but the headquarters is in Paris.
Yes.
And they walk in, and it's like played as a joke. That's the exact same lobby as like the one that we usually have, but obviously it's just because we want to use the same set because we don't want to have to like get another one, or build another one. So it's like, okay, I mean, I'll let it slide. I'm not going to harp on it, but I did. There was a slight roll of the eye when he had that line. I was like, okay, yeah.
We know your tricks.
Yeah, but and to their credit, like everything else when they're on Narn, like all the red hallways with the harsh light, it does feel different. You know, it's not the same hallways from Centauri Prime, but
No, and I guess that's due to the fact that they also have red eyes, so they like developed on a red planet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
To be able to see better, perhaps.
Yeah.
In this light.
Yeah, that makes enough sense to me.
I like it. Yes.
Yeah, why not? Makes sense. But there's a great scene at the start where it's basically just Londo with all of his like conspirators who are planning to help with this assassination, and talking about how, yeah, this is crazy, he's going to destroy the whole planet, we have to do it, like it's today or never, like it's today or Centauri Prime dies. So it does a good job of making the episode feel like it's big right at the start, because that's what sort of leads us into the opening titles, is like this meeting, and it's shot in a very tense way where the camera never stops moving. It's constantly kind of like going behind Londo's head and sort of going up and down behind other heads. You know, Veer's in the room as well, of course, and it's all building up. For a briefest moment in time, Emperor Katagia actually does say to Londo, "No, I'm not going to be on the planet when it blows up. Well, that'd be silly. And you'll be by my side, so you'll survive too." Like, he actually is going to bring Londo with him. And to Londo's credit, this is not enough for him to go, "Oh, in that case, call off the assassination because my skin is saved."
Right.
Not that I thought he would do that, but I'm just, I'm pointing it out. Like, he could have theoretically.
I mean, his plan is still to die, right? Cardassians, the Emperor's.
Yeah, ultimately, but I mean, well, not die per se. His plan is to ascend. In the same way that Ironheart ascended. I guess it's technically a death, but.
Right.
But he can't do that if he dies in like the planet exploding Krypton style. Oh, what does he expect? The shadows to have a bubble around him, like protects him?
Well, who knows if the shadows can even fulfill that promise anyway? Or if they're just manipulating somebody who's vulnerable.
That's a fair point. Yeah, the kick is a lie. As a Portal taught us.
That's right.
That's my hip pop culture reference that's only 15 years old now. Is it 50? Yeah, it's about, well, maybe a year or two off, but yeah, it's about that.
For the first one, I'm not sure. Although I think the first and second one were pretty close to each other.
First one was in the orange box. I think it was about 2007, which would be 15 years. Sounds about right. And 2 was like 2010, 2011. Not that it matters, but anyway. So, yeah. It's... Honestly, it's a fun. There's a lot of fun little details in this. Given that, of course, Veer ultimately is the one who actually assassinates the Emperor, just by happenstance, because the Emperor loses his shit and hits Londo because Londo says something he doesn't like, and it knocks the assassination like pen or whatever you want to call it out of his hand, and
syringe.
I guess syringe. But he can't find it again, so we get this little surprise where Veer's picked it up and he's the one who actually kills the Emperor. What's so good about this is there's a scene earlier on where Veer brings him this murder weapon, right? And like Londo's looking at it and he's like explaining how to use it, and so we understand the ins and outs of like what it's going to count as a kill and so on. But one of the neat things here is that this scene starts with like basically a joke where Londo says, "Oh, that's why I sent you, Veer, because no one would ever suspect you're capable of doing anything heinous or whatever." And Veer acts like, not insulted, I don't know if it's the right word, but does sort of like, "Well, I wouldn't say incapable." And it's a little joke moment where Londo's like, "Just take the compliment for what it is, Veer." The whole point is you're unsuspecting. That's the point. Which is a really neat little setup, because I thought at this moment, as soon as Veer stabbed the Emperor, I was like, that was perfect. They set this up, like, and thematically they set this up that no one's ever going to suspect Veer could be the one that would do this, and then he is the one that does it. That's just good writing. I like that.
Although he's dealing with the trauma of it as well.
Oh yeah,
I do.
he's not happy he's done it. He turns into drunk Veer
Right.
later in the episode.
I do like that he explains also that he has to get it right between the two hearts.
Yes.
The Centauri are so excessive. They have 2 hearts and 6 genitalia.
Yes.
Maybe that's what the second heart's for. Just so much blood to pump.
Aye, one heart can only handle 3 genitalia at any given time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it looks like the hearts are right next to each other. So it's not like a dinosaur thing where they have they have like 2 brains. I don't think they had 2 hearts.
Yeah, but they were
Maybe.
located in separate areas.
Right.
Yes. Yeah. No, I mean, so Veer's whole thing is that he's a wreck later on when this has happened, and they've confirmed the kill.
Mm-hmm.
And Londo's been put in charge, although not as emperor, because there's no next in line for emperor, and it would take too much time to appoint an emperor. So he's instead the prime minister of Centauri Prime for the time being to make decisions right now, because they need someone making decisions, because they're literally as we know, they're 3 days away from potential attack, and also the fact that they all agree, like all these people who are with Londo agree that they have to go back on this deal with the shadows. So that's something to deal with. So we got all this set up, but Veer's like drinking himself under the gutter, and there's just a lot in this scene where Londo's, and it's wonderful because this used to be Londo, right? Londo was the one drinking all the time, and Veer can't handle what he's done. He keeps seeing the Emperor's face. He talks about how he never wanted like a high position. He just wanted, a nice title.
He just wanted a nice job.
Yeah.
A good job.
Good job. He never
Maybe a
wanted
wife.
to do anything bad. And Londo, like, first of all, he admits that he's been envious of Veer, and the reason why he's been envious is because Veer actually has risen quite far without losing his innocence, and that's something that Londo gave up a long time ago. I thought that was a really powerful little admission from Londo, and I also like the ultimate part of his speech is like, the reason why this is hurting you so much, the reason why you can't let this go is because you still have a heart, because you still have a soul, and that means there's still hope for
Hearts.
you. Yeah, and that's why I'm still a little bit envious, but it's a really positive idea. It's like, no, it's good that you're hurting. It's good that this has affected you. It means it's ultimately this idea that if Londo knows that Veer one day is going to take his place as emperor or prime minister or whatever, this idea that he's happy that Veer's going to replace him because Veer's better than he is, and he knows that, and his acceptance of that's quite interesting.
Well, I mean, we don't know if it's going to be after or before him, unless the prophecy is wrong, or in this case has been changed and has made Londo prime minister instead of emperor. Maybe he can, because he's in this powerful position now, he could just assign Veer as emperor.
I think you're overthinking it. I think the ending of the future scenes where Veer stepped out after Londo's death kind of implied to me that that's when he's going to become emperor. I mean, they could swerve us, but
right.
It's kind of touching though. It's touching that Londo. Because this is the thing, Londo says that there's no hope for him anymore, right? The only thing he has left is his honor, and I actually believe that means something to him, because in the same scene he says to Veer that, we're leaving, I promised Jakar, and I'm a man of my word, I'm going to keep my word, because the only thing I have left is honor. And I think in some ways Londo is almost like underestimating his own like values, like, because he's saying it's just honor, but honor kind of leads to a lot of things, like the idea that he is going to stick to his word and stick to whatever he's promised Jakar, and the idea that he is going to push one day perhaps for Veer to be a better leader than he could be, because he does have compassion, because he does have empathy, he does have these other qualities. Him recognizing that and knowing that there needs to be a change, like, his act of being better and doing the one thing he can is to ensure that whoever's next is better than him, right? There is like a, he may not see that as a conscience per se, but it kind of is, even if he's not thinking of it that way. And that's, it's like the idea of characters not being able to, like, they can be honest to a point, but ultimately there's only so honest you can be about yourself. It's like someone else ultimately at some point has to step in and say, no, you have done something good here, or you have done this, right? Because most people are their own worst critics, by and large. And not that Londo hasn't done things that deserve to be criticised, because absolutely he has. But just in the context here of like you will actually maybe achieve some good in if nothing else in how you have helped Veer rise through the ranks and maybe set him up to be someone who will be important after you, whether that's while you're still alive or after your death or whatever.
So do you think then, if that's what Londo is doing, that he is setting up his redemption fully?
I don't
like
think
it's its own way of like, well, if I just make this good for Veer in the future so that he can make a better one, then that will be a full redemption arc.
I don't think as of yet he's intentionally doing that or like planning anything like that, but it's more that it's just kind of naturally happening, and maybe this is the start of him realizing that Veer actually is like the future that Centauri Prime needs in some way.
Right.
You know, like I don't think he's actively thinking about it. Right? I think right now he's just worried about, oh shit, how do we deal with these shadow ships and like the Vorlons in 3 days? Like I think right now he's just shitting his pants about various plates that he's got spinning.
I suppose that's true.
Yeah, but you know, because we've talked about in the past how Veer's like Londo's conscience. So this idea that he has to protect his conscience, which is Veer now. So it's at risk right now because Veer's like struggling. So the idea of him like finally starting to admit that he appreciates Veer and appreciates that part of him, you know, it's a touching element to the story that can like maybe propel future decisions.
I enjoyed the performance from Stephen First also, of his like admission of like he was just trying to be a good person with a good, you know, with a decent job in order to like, I know we already kind of talked about it, but then it's just been surrounded consistently by all these bad influences. And if you want to be in the political sphere of Centauri, then you're going to have to, you know, be corrupt and do bad things like murder people. And
which kind of beautifully points out why they need someone like Veer.
Right.
They need more people like Veer because everyone else is so corrupt.
He's the one good cop.
Yeah, that's kind of what it's like, just on a more political level. And the fact that he doesn't like have aspirations to be like a leader is
he's the reluctant hero.
Yeah, well, that's exactly why he's the best person for well, maybe not right now. I'm not saying he's ready for that role, but why in the long run he might be the best person for the job, because he doesn't want it for glory. He doesn't want it for the dream of being held up on a throne and worshipped. He'll do it because someone needs to take charge and make the right decisions, and he'll try his best to do that.
I do like the overall storyline with the Cartasia, which has ended now, but
yeah, obviously.
Of his like, this is also Londo's punishment for wanting the good old days. Like, you want the good old days, you get the good old emperors too, and some of them were crazy.
Well, that's the beauty of this. So before this scene, could we kind of skip to the Veer scene? But before this scene, when he's in the throne room and he's talking to the other Centauri, so it's when he tells them, yeah, the emperor's definitely dead. He basically says, you know, to keep his promise to G'Kar, he throws into his little speech, he's like, I nominate that, you know, like 2 emperors have died one way or another because we've been dealing with Narn. Maybe we should just leave this world to itself and it's not worth the effort. So he sells it in kind of a nasty way, which is like, they're dangerous, let's just stay away. But he's still sort of keeping good on his word by convincing the rest of the Centauri Prime to leave. And
he still has to, you know, play the card of like, oh, we all love the Emperor, he was great, and in the history books he'll be great or whatever. But
I think what's interesting is the way he sort of argues this, and the way he agrees, and G'Kar does this the same in this very episode, even more so in fact, is that he does kind of have to go back on, and it's because, you know, go back to season 1, season 2, Londo, all he's talking about is like revenge on the Narn and like being strong and all that. And now that he's had it, and now that he's went through all this, he's like, it wasn't worth it. It wasn't really what he wanted.
Well, I guess that's why we get Veer's final line in that area too, or in that scene, was him just looking out the window while they're leaving and saying like, what was it all for?
Yeah, as the fireworks are going off because Narn are celebrating that Centauri Prime are leaving.
What a big old waste of time and death.
Yeah. It was all for nothing. Yeah, so this idea that Londo, even if he's not admitted it quite yet, like everything he was hoping for and like saying he wanted in season 1 and 2 was, you know, he was wrong. Like, he's learned that he was wrong. And G'Kar, funnily enough, also goes through the same thing. You know, the scene towards the end of the episode where he's free finally, and he's with the other Narn who are wrecking the throne room now. And they're like, we should build up and get our revenge on Centauri. And G'Kar's like, no, what a waste of effort. And no, that's just going to ruin us again. That's just going to continue the cycle. Like, trust me.
He says that the Centauri are the example of like a failing race. Like they just don't know what to do, and that's why they went to war. Like,
yeah, they're on a path to self-destruction.
They're pathetic.
Yeah, they should be pitied, and they
don't
should
follow them.
Because they wanted to nominate him as an emperor. It's like, no, we don't have an emperor. We're Narn. And he's like, yeah, but it works for the Centauri, so maybe we should copy them. It's like, no, like, I'm not going to... I didn't work so hard to overthrow a dictatorship just so that I could become a new dictator. Like, that's not what the point of this was. Which is exactly what Centauri do. We've heard, because it's been alluded to in the past of their history where there is a lot of backstabbing and scheming to, like, get the new emperor on the throne. And G'Kar's like, no, we need to try and be better than them. And it's this idea that he's went through so much, he's learned so much. I really hope we get Londo and G'Kar in the same room again. I was hoping we'd get a scene with them together by the end of the episode after everything went down, because obviously there's one early on, and it's a really good scene where Londo comes in to like say, hey, this is the plan. They're going to like parade you through the halls in front of other Narn. You know, all I need you to do is distract them. I've weakened your chains. Blah blah blah. And G'Kar's got this great line, right? Because he says earlier in the scene that an empty eye is allowed him to see an empty heart, and then later in the scene, he just looks at Londo and says, "Mollari, do you know you have an empty heart?" And it's just...
Well, I've got a backup.
Yeah. But it was just, there's a really good delivery, I thought. And
that's what you get when you get both of them in a room together.
Which leads to a fantastic badass moment. I love this so much. So they lead G'Kar into the throne room, and the Emperor's like blah blah blah. But right before it starts, he leads over to Londo and says, "Oh, by the way, I had my own personal men replace those chains, which the chains that we know Londo had weakened, so G'Kar could break out of them. Because just to be in the safe side, because they looked a bit weak to me." And I had the passing thought, I'm like, what if G'Kar's such a badass that he just breaks them anyway? And sure enough, that's what happens. He breaks out of them anyway.
Yeah, Emperor's like, you can't break those chains. They're made out of triticalion or something.
But it's a really good moment. It's this will to survive, desire to like live, and the right thing, and all the rest of it. So it's this sort of impressive thing, and it's almost like in that moment as well, Londo is looking at G'Kar's got something to truly fight for, and he's seeing the will he has to fight for it, and it's almost like, yeah, like for whatever it's worth, G'Kar's mind's in the right place, and it's just further confirmation for Londo, I think, that I need to be fighting the right fights, and fighting against the Narn was never the focus. It was never the point. So, since the Centauri themselves are the ones that had to like be dealt with, like his own people needed to be fixed. And
right,
they were never going to be fixed because we went back and took over the Narn again.
Yeah, I do think it's interesting that Londo is playing up the angle of, well, we got our revenge and now we should leave, because this planet really doesn't have anything for us, instead of the angle of we never should have been here in the first place.
I think it's just too tough a sell to the others because of what they all believe. They were all for this, well, at least most of them anyway, beforehand.
Yeah.
So
doesn't want to leave a guilty conscience on others, I guess.
Well, no, I think it's more just that they'll rebel against him. They'll then not see him fit to have a voice or lead them. Like they'll turn against him because they'll seem like a sympathizer. Like
he did have a council in the beginning full of people in the Red Room where they were going over the plans and stuff. So there were other Centauri involved in this.
Well, yeah, but I don't think they were involved because they want to like make good on this promise to leave Narn. I think the Emperor's crazy and he's going to get us all killed, so we have to deal with that.
Right.
I don't think that necessarily means they're going to agree if he does try to make that case that we should never really have bothered doing this in the first place. Maybe some of them would, and that'd be like uplifting and nice, but we have no evidence to suggest that.
Well, there was that friend that Londo had, right, that from season 2 or something that showed up and said we shouldn't be fighting Narn. We're good people. We should be leaving them alone. He was like a Narn apologist or something.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I mean, even the previous
right
emperor wanted to apologize and wanted to make peace.
Yeah.
And then we got, yeah, he was like a nice old man, and then Emperor Kurtaj is like this like maniac.
Yeah.
This
Which only
maniac.
got. I mean, they also, that little mini console in this episode said like, oh, if he was only there because Rifa, because you killed Rifa basically, because Rifa was keeping somebody else from. Go ahead.
No, it was more. Rifa had put things in place for this emperor to get in power, and the only reason why it worked is because Londo helped kill other people that would have stopped him.
Right.
So it wasn't killing Rifa. Like it was already he was already emperor by that point, I think, or on his path.
Maybe. So, yeah, maybe we had heard about him before we had seen him.
Yeah. I mean, Londo has like things. I mean, he even says that in the scene, like, you know, like, yes, I had a part to play in this, and like I have to own up to that. But like, I didn't know he was this crazy nut job. Yeah. So, yeah. I mean, obviously, it's a very satisfying conclusion by and large, I think, to all this stuff. I look forward to Londo and G'Kar like together again in some capacity. And yeah, the idea that G'Kar has to start changing hearts and minds about how his people feel about wanting revenge, because that's not the path they should take. Because one day, like, Narn and Centauri might have to like have each other's backs, in the same way that all the other races right now are starting to have each other's backs because the Vorlons and the Shadows are doing what they're doing. Yeah. And if that day ever comes, like, you know,
right? I mean, they this has been brought up, I think, by G'Kar when he had his moment of enlightenment of just the cycle of violence needs to end.
Yeah.
And the Narn need to be the one to do it.
Yeah. So, no, good stuff. Great stuff in that plot, for sure. And then the other plot, which is that the Shadows are reacting to the fact that the Vorlons are doing what they're doing by also taking out planets that seem to have picked a side, but picked the Vorlon side. And they've got this new world killer, which, like, they don't really know what it is at first. It's like they've infected the atmosphere with something, because you can see it, like, covering the planet. It's not until later we see that it's, like, firing stuff into, like, the crust of the Earth, or, well, not Earth, but you know what I mean, the crust of the planet. And, like, ultimately it's going to, like, just destroy the entire thing from its core. And it's like, okay, so they're killing millions of people, and the race against time at the end of the episode is that the Vorlons are on their way to kill another outpost, but they're getting more ballsy. The targets are getting bigger and more populated, and they're going towards a planet, I think, with 6 million people on it. I think
6 billion.
Was it billion? Okay, so about what Earth had at the time then when this was made.
Yes.
Yeah, funnily enough.
I noted that.
Yeah. So basically, it's like, okay, we have to have a plan, we have to do something, and Sheridan's got an idea. It boils down to them luring the because at first it's like, okay, we're going to have a big offense, we have to protect that planet, so we have to move now, and we're going to take on the Vorlons. They've sent a small part of the fleet to go and try and slow them down a little bit. The idea being that they can set up on the around the planet. But the main part of the plan, as we find out, is that they're going to lure the Shadows there and make them fight. Because the one thing they've noticed is that
let them fight.
Is that the Vorlons and the Shadows have avoided any direct conflict, and maybe that's because both sides believe they're not ready to fight the other yet. Perhaps
they're still fighting their proxy war.
Yeah, so it's like, no, let's force them into a fight. let's have them like wipe each other out as much as possible, and then we can maybe pick apart whoever's left or whatever. So a lot of this is like the setup of this plan. It's like it's Sheridan explaining it to like the leaders of all these other races. Garibaldi's in there, and we have there's another part of the plan. We'll get to that with the one other part of the plan we'll get to later, but a lot of this is that there's a White Star ship with Bryan Cranston on it out at this planet that's already been attacked by the Shadows, and they are going to be tasked with being the ones to lure the Shadows in, and it's a suicide mission because they have to go in and have the Shadows believe that the Shadows have stolen intel So they have to. It has to be convincing, which means they have to like die, and like they have to take it from their ship. Which is basically that they're going to. There's a new outpost that's anti-shadow or something next to this planet, and that's why they're going to come here and show up and get the nasty surprise.
It has to look real. So gotta be real death.
So there's a whole scene here where Bryan Cranston's like getting this information, and I think it's kind of effective. Obviously, it helps it's Bryan Cranston. Although I'll say it, Bryan Cranston here is not as amazing as an actor as he would become in later. Like Bryan Cranston in Breaking Bad is fine. Like but in Breaking Bad though, he's like next level. Like he's winning all the awards for good reason.
Right.
Here he's got 2 scenes to do this entire character, and it's this emotional scene where you see like the leaders of the other races who are all watching this call from around the war room, and they're kind of like feeling really awkward because this guy's been told that this is a suicide mission.
He's gotta take one for the team.
Yeah.
Make the ultimate sacrifice.
And Sheridan's like, "Are you married?" He's like, "No." I was like, "Well, that's a plus at least then, I guess."
He should have said, "But I got 6 kids."
Part was like, "What do you mean that's a plus? That means he didn't even have a happy like romantic life before he's gonna set off to death. It just means that his life is like less good, and then he dies anyway."
Yeah. Not cool, Sheridan.
I know.
Sheridan's like, "Well, I can't go because I'm engaged."
Yeah, I'm engaged now. This is Delenn, my wife. No one explained Borat to Delenn. They'll just break her mind.
You're right.
Yeah. No, like I thought these scenes were well done. It does a good job of building up, because I mean the last shot of the episode is just the fleet leaving, with Sheridan and all the ships going to this planet because we're going like.
Yeah.
So.
I'm still a little upset that they already had a character for this and they didn't use him, but that's all right.
I mean, as much as I love the joke you're making, I do have to assume that they have plans for Cole, and that's why it's not him that's doing this sacrifice moment.
Yeah.
Don't worry. I'm sure the ghost of Pucci is going to like come through like the jump gate and save the day at a big pivotal moment later in the season.
We saw him die.
I said the ghost of.
Maybe the Ancient One will just breathe the breath of life onto him. Whichever Ancient One Ivanova's going to meet up with.
Well, yeah, that's what Ivanova's sent off to find the first ones, or other first ones. But notably, Lorian's going with her this time, and he will help find them.
Yeah,
so,
he knows how to talk to them.
Yeah, I mean, they're his, peers and or kind of children, because as he said, he was even earlier than everyone else. So, so they're hoping that there's going to be some first ones to show up and help fight. So this does feel like big final battle feeling get into this, so which is why it's like, okay, so even if this lasts like 2 episodes, because maybe it's going to be that big. What's after? What are we doing next? I have no idea, and I'm excited to find out.
Maybe they'll just see Londo and Jakar as the example of they just can't keep the circle of violence going, The line must be drawn here.
So the rest of season 4 is just going to be them sitting around a campfire saying Kumbaya.
Row, 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 row your boat.
I knew you were going to say that.
The best Star Trek movie.
We might have been talking about that scene from Star Trek 5, The Final Frontier, before we started recording. So I knew Tara was going to make that joke when I mentioned a campfire.
Well, I assumed you were setting it up.
I mean, what do you think of that scene with Ivanova, though? She got quite personal and emotional in that scene.
Yeah, she was a little disappointed because she was very much had everything planned out about what she was going to do to get involved in the fight and was ready for it and was amped to be a part of it. And then Sheridan's like, "Oh, by the way, you're going on a separate mission because you're a lady. So you have to go shopping with the first one."
I don't think that was the reason. I feel like it was more that he trusts her to succeed in doing the
she had
mission.
already started this mission, so
Yeah.
it made sense to send Ivanova. And yeah, also because of the trust. And then he basically says, "By the way, like, you're a great friend and you deserve all good things." And she gets a little happy about it.
You just got to gloss over the entire speech she makes about like how her mother died and that she doesn't trust when people say that they're going to come for her because her mother never did. I thought that
Well,
was.
I mean, I don't know why she would blame her mother for that.
Well, I'm not saying she did blame her mother for it. It's given her this complex that when people say that, she gets, you know, not defensive. That's not the right word, but you know, gets braces for disappointment effectively. Right.
It's like when you want something and then your parents say, "We'll see." That means no.
Yeah, that's exactly what it's like. Yes, but your mother says, "I'll come and get you later," but then commits suicide. That's exactly the same as that.
Yeah, they're pretty on par.
Lots of big things. Mm-hmm. Lots of big things in this episode. Particularly, I think the Londo and G'Kar stuff is exceptional. I think all the stuff setting up the big fight is good setup, but it's inherently not as touching or as impactful, I think, to the viewer. Because, and that's not
the next episode will probably cover all that.
The next episode is going to hit as hard with the action, I suspect, and the big showdown. And then we'll see what comes after, because I genuinely don't know, and that's quite exciting, honestly. So yeah, let us know what you thought of the episode in the comments below. Like, subscribe, ding the bell for notifications, and all that stuff. Get us on the Twitters at mailed_fudge for channel updates. Of course, you can support us at Patreon, can't you, Tara?
That's right, Peter. If you enjoy our reviews, please check out our Patreon page. It's patreon.com/MovFuzzTV. And if you donate as low as $1 per month, you'll get bonus episodes for other shows we do. And if you donate $5 per month, you'll get access to these Babylon 5 reviews 6 days early. And other shows you get early too. Thank you.
But that's pretty much it. So thank you once again for watching or listening. We always appreciate it. Keep watching Babylon 5. Just don't give away the home world.